Good morning, everyone. Ask everyone to take their seats if there's anyone outside. Did you want to make a few? Oh, you're me. You're Asian Nancy. That's okay. Ah, do you want to just say a few? I don't know. So we'll just get started here. We have a lot of exciting sessions this morning as well. Everyone had a good rest. Hope you had a chance to get some sport this morning and take a look around the Olympic Park. I think there's been, oh, thank you. Okay, all right. There's a lot of excitement to see all of the different legacies from Olympic Games Seoul 1988. So hopefully if you have the time to take a look around the Olympic Park, and you'll have the venue tour tomorrow. So lots of great opportunities to see and learn more about the legacy of Seoul. So we'll get started with our next session on intangible legacies, spreading the Olympic values to the next generation. I'm particularly excited about this session because I know about the great work that the Pyeongchang Legacy Foundation is doing. So good, looking forward to seeing what's happening here. No pressure. All right, we'll have our first speaker without further ado from Los Angeles 1984. We have Renata Simril, the President and CEO of the LA 1984 Foundation.
Good morning. I'm sorry, good morning. Thank you. Thank you. It is, it's a true honor. I'm grateful to be with all of you to share a little bit about our Olympic legacy in Los Angeles. And I have to say, after a full day of conversation and sharing, I'm humbled to be amongst such great Olympic cities, especially Seoul, which holds a special place in our hearts because it was Los Angeles' Mayor Tom Bradley who passed the Olympic flag to the mayor of Seoul at the conclusion of our games in 1984. So the Los Angeles Olympic Organizing Committee, led by Peter Ueberroth, were honored to host the Summer Olympic Games in 1984. And we continue to embody the spirit of Olympianism in our work to preserve our legacy for future generations, particularly as we look to the privilege of hosting our third Olympic Games in 2028. And for 37 years, we have set an example of Olympianism in our work, placing sport at the service of harmonious development of humankind with a view to promoting a peaceful society concerned with the preservation of human dignity, especially for those on the margins of our society. And in 1984, we witnessed with our eyes what it meant to engage an entire city in an effort of common purpose, to unify a world that was split and divided, to reveal our shared humanity and our ability to bridge division together, to see the potential of sport, not just to come to a moment, but to meet that moment and to rewrite that moment. The Summer Olympic Games in Los Angeles in 1984 gave us a new narrative for our city, for our world, and for the Olympic movement when we needed it most. And our Olympic legacy resulted from the implementation of a vision of Peter and his team, which originated from the alignment of the Olympic movement's core vision of building a better world through sport. And it was in the necessity of Los Angeles having to host an entirely privately financed games. And the efforts of the LA Olympic Organizing Committee left both tangible and intangible benefits that still endure to this day. And most people do refer to our social development aspect of our legacy in the embodiment of the LA84 Foundation. But this is just one of the hard and soft legacies left by those summer games. And I would be remiss if I didn't highlight just three of the 7 dimensions of legacy, which I believe are most relevant for today. From an economic value and brand equity perspective, the sponsor partnership model created new concepts in television rights sales, sports sponsorship, and ticketing that made the stunning revenue total possible for our games, and it influenced IOC's top sponsor program, which generates more than 40% of the Olympic revenue today. The L84 Foundation Digital Library, which houses one of the world's most comprehensive collections of Olympic and sport historical information. It's a research library that's open to the world, and it is one of the top 1% of websites in the world that is trafficked traffic it today. And we've had over 500 books, reports, special issues, theses, and dissertations written using our research library as first-person research. And we are Hollywood, and we've also had 44 movies, documentaries, and exhibitions also using our research library. The foundation also has a large collection of Olympic Games art and artifact. At my last count, we probably have the 4th largest collection of Olympic artifacts in the world. And most of those are from the 1932 and 1984 games, but we have artifacts dating back to 1896. And we also have, which I think is a great distinction for Los Angeles, one of 3 continuous Olympic burning flames in our courtyard. Lausanne, Switzerland, and Greece are the other 2, and it burns every day. I do not ask my staff what the gas bill is, but it's certainly a treat when I go to the office. And our facilities serve as the center of Olympic legacy, and we have had the honor of hosting opening ceremonies for various Olympic Games, engaging in cultural exchange. Pyeongchang, we had an opening ceremonies. We also had opening ceremonies for the Tokyo Games as well. And it is an opportunity for us to use our facility and to bring our Southern California community together in the spirit of Olympianism. Organized sport for development is another dimension of legacy that 1984 left. And there was an intentional focus on gender equality and inclusion that led to this significant expansion of women's events at the game, including synchronized swimming, rhythmic gymnastics, marathon, and the 400-meter hurdles. Shooting and road cycling were new events introduced in the 1984 Olympic Games for women. And there were nearly 1/3 of all athletes to compete in those games were women. And 1984 also featured the first ever wheelchair race. We heard yesterday with great distinction Seoul's embodiment of the Paralympic Games, but it was in 1984 that we held the 800 women's and the 1,500 men's wheelchair race were added to the track and field competition. And while it was a small gesture using sport as a vehicle for inclusion and access messaging, it was the messaging was perfection, as one of my colleagues said. And it was one additional important step in the formation of the Paralympic Games. And Candace Cable recently spoke at a plaque dedication for Peter Ueberroth a few weeks ago, and she added this quote that I thought was particularly apt to share with you today. By adding the 2 wheelchair events to the 1984 Games, you, Peter, created a massive paradigm shift for us, disabled people, and also for non-disabled people all over the world. It wasn't just for the 90,000 people in the stadium. It wasn't just for us athletes that were there on the floor of the Coliseum, or all the disabled people watching, on the global community that were watching, those 7 to 8 minutes of competition where their negative biases and stigma surrounding disabled people at that time were peeled back on that day. Those few minutes on the world broadcast took us, the discarded, dehumanized, disabled people, out of the dark shadows of worthlessness and brought us into the bright light of truth, that we are all humans and with value and deserve access and inclusion for all that life has to offer. So while a small gesture, significance on a global scale. The other dimension was human skills, network, and innovation. We were the first to use volunteers as widely as we did for workforce. There were more than 33,000 volunteer staff from those games. Most were Angelenos, but there were volunteers from a global scale that helped us put on a successful games. And the program continues today with a lot of the major sporting events that still come to Los Angeles, like the Super Bowl, like the college football playoffs, and the World Cup that we are honored to host in 2026. The Olympic torch relay. Up until then, it was a short program ending with the opening ceremonies, but we decided to expand that to a parade across the country. And that torch relay raised nearly $11 million for charity across 82 days. And it was over 15,000 kilometers with nearly 3,500 youth legacy kilometers, kilometer barriers. So 3,500 youth ran a kilometer for each torch relay that we thought was pretty extraordinary. Oh, pardon me. I'm advancing myself. But yes, perhaps the most enduring legacy is that our work with the L84 Foundation. And that was created with a share of the financial surplus from those games. And our board of directors invested the original $93 million of our share in the U.S. public markets And we, to this day, rely on the investment income to preserve our social development legacy. And I have to say this decision was critical to our ability to sustain our impact over time and generation. That we use approximately 10 million of our investment income to support our work in the communities across Southern California. And to date, our endowment has grown to nearly $200 million, all while investing nearly $300 million in our grant-making investments in sports activities intended to create, expand, or enhance structured youth sports participation, with a particular emphasis on underserved communities, including girls, ethnic minorities, physically challenged, and developmentally disabled, coaching education and training, as well as research and convening on youth sports, some of the most prevailing issues around youth sports. And since our creation, LA 84 has shown the impact that sports can have and what we can do through sport. And for us, it's not the millions of dollars we've invested or the sports knowledge we have pioneered and disseminated over, or the millions of youth we serve that excite us most. It is knowing that we unlock the potential to cultivate the best in our athletes, in our young athletes, undeveloped, that would go otherwise undeveloped, guiding coaches to cultivate the best in their young athletes, providing fresh insights into the most pressing issues in youth sport, and strengthening the ties between generations and communities, and providing the skills that make young people life-ready through sport. We are most proud when we use sport to build a bridge to a brighter future for those who need it most, a future free of drugs, gangs, poverty. And working with our grantees and our partners, we enable youth to become athletes, and athletes to become educated, responsible, resourceful citizens who are well prepared to take on the immense challenges of an increasingly complex world. But in 2016, when I took the helm of the L84 Foundation from my friend and mentor, Anita DeFrance, an International Olympic Committee member, and we were in the bidding process for our third Olympic Games, it also was a moment for our board to re-examine our legacy and to ask the question, were we having the impact that we intended? And we did this through the lens of IOC's Agenda 2020, the UN 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, and through His Holy Father, Pope Francis's Sport at the Service of Humanity movement, which all called upon us to combine our passion for sports with the value of faith to better serve humanity. And what we found were there were lots of organizations on the grassroots level doing great work. And they were all doing the work in an individual capacity, and they were all speaking about that work in slightly different ways, is that there wasn't a coming together of our organizations to speak with one voice. And we also found that despite our efforts of nearly 4 decades, the gap between kids who can access sports for social and human development and those who could not had widened, and that we could leverage our platform to drive deeper social change. So in 2018, we created a not-for-profit public charity, the Play Equity Fund, to more deeply dive into systematic issues that cause these inequities in the first place, and also to create a vehicle that could speak with one voice and, yes, may raise more public resources to help more kids play. And we do this through a collaborative effort. So while our sports teams partners, our corporate brands, our philanthropic and community-based partners are leading intersectional efforts on the ground around gender equality, racial justice, and accessibility for all, the Play Equity Fund serves as a convener at the local, state, and national scale to galvanize these efforts to get together under a centralized focus. We offer a platform and resource support for social change efforts through a collaborative model to harness our individual efforts into collective change, working to speak with one voice as a team of change agents. And with the focus on play equity as a social justice issue, we use the language of equity to elevate the worth and value of sport and play through messaging and storytelling in the media and across our partners' social platforms. And together with our partners, we advocate for larger policy changes and government funding necessary to help more kids play. And Play Equity is committed to shifting the paradigm so that all children, not just those with resources or ability, have access to sport, play, and movement within their own communities to create pathways of opportunities so that they can become Olympians in life. You know, I was just a kid in 1984 when the Summer Olympics arrived in Los Angeles, and like many young people in my neighborhood and beyond, I daydreamed about representing my country as an athlete, competing at the highest level against the best athletes in the world, inspired by the Olympic ideals of teamwork, excellence, and respect. I envision standing on the podium, a tear rolling down my cheek, and listening to our national anthem as the American flag was slowly raised. Tennis was my sport, but like millions of kids then, I can only muse at the possibility, because as a child growing up in poverty, my family didn't have the resources to nurture my talent. But sport helped make me life ready. And without sports, I would not be blessed with my role of overseeing the important legacy of the 1984 Summer Olympic Games at a time that we make way for what I know will be an extraordinary social legacy left by my colleagues at LA 28. With all the challenges and issues the world is currently facing today, and with the hopelessness that many of our young people feel, it is timely and necessary for sport and faith, embodied in the power of the Olympic movement, to remind and reawaken us all to the massive power of sport that these two pillars in human life can provide. Peter Ueberroth has a similar background growing up and often recounts the story of how his sport of water polo created pathways for him to college, to the 1956 Olympics as an alternate, and to an unimaginable career of success and impact. He knew firsthand the power of sport to enrich the lives of so many, and it is because of him that our legacy endures. So let me yield the rest of my time to a video and to let Peter Ueberroth have his closing remarks. Thank you.
The 1984 Olympic Games were a watershed moment, not only for all sporting events since, but for the city of Los Angeles. The 84 Games expanded competition for women athletes, ushered in new technology and possibilities in sport, and gave rise to the LA 84 Foundation as its legacy. LA 84 levels the playing field, so sports are accessible to kids from all backgrounds through infrastructure projects, grant making, coach training, and research on youth sports and community health and childhood well-being. To broaden its impact, LA 84 established the Play Equity Fund as its charitable partner.
Every child, regardless of where they come from, what they look like, their ability, has the opportunity to experience what we believe is a transformational power of sport.
The LA 84 Foundation supports sports, play, and healthy programs across the region to help make kids ready for what comes next in life.
If we have somehow brought this world a little bit closer, then we have secured a better future for all the children of the world.
Thank you. Thank you. What a great presentation. Very motivational. Just before we introduce our next speaker, we are in a very in a more intimate setting than yesterday. So I know you will have a lot of questions. So we're trying to make it a little bit more interactive. So following the presentations, we'll try to take some more questions from you for the speakers. Our next presentation, we'll hear about the experiences of Vancouver 2012. Vancouver 2010. I'd like to ask Bruce Dewar, President and CEO, to come forward.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here, and I'd like to thank the IOC and the organizers for including me in today's presentation and the whole conference. It's interesting when we look back at our games in 2010, we took a very different journey than the LA story or the story you're going to hear about Korea in their Winter Games. But again, it just shows you that we're all looking at legacies slightly different, but we have the same belief of the power of sport can really change lives, and how do we make that work in our country, building off the opportunity of hosting the games. So quite often people think of legacies when the flame goes out on the cauldron. It's interesting, in Vancouver, we started in the bidding process. We had to bid domestically to have the rights to represent Canada for the 2010 Games. And in that bidding process domestically, there was a commitment to make sure there was a legacy off the bid, win or lose, that sport would benefit from the bidding process. So legacy was at the heart of both our bid and of our vision for the Games. And that's an important piece because, again, it meant that sport was going to be front and center in all decisions throughout the organization and the partners around the games. So in 2002, a separate entity was pulled out to allow the bid to focus on the bid and for an organization to actually focus on legacy leading into the games. And that was 2010 Legacies Now. And its mandate was sport and recreation, playground to podium, to really make sure that people have better pathways into sport and hopefully to lead for them to be participating in a future games and hear the Canadian national anthem, or if they're from another country living in Canada, their own country back home. So it was really important that this was carried forward. And back then there wasn't the framework that the IOC is now designed to really make sure all games look at all aspects of what a legacy could be. But the one thing about 2010 Legacy Now, it was all about social legacy. It was not about bricks and mortar. We did a survey of our citizens in British Columbia, which is the host province for the games. And they said that 68% of them want to see a legacy that wasn't bricks and mortar, something that they could actually feel and see the difference in their communities, especially in remote communities outside of the host city or the host venue mountain. So we really paid attention to that. And in the bid phase, we did lots of consultations to find out from citizens how they thought we could leverage the power of the Olympics. And I was worried when we went to each community, they'd come back with the exact same thing. But communities are much smarter than me, and they came up with things that really resonated with their city plans and also with their citizens in those small communities. So we came up with this framework for what we would do. And again, the biggest pillar was sport and healthy living. Again, that playground to podium. And we had many different programs within that, but that was the core, really using sport as a driver for social change. There were other areas that were important. The one that might seem a little bit different up here is literacy. In our province, we had low literacy numbers, and the premier of our province felt we could use the games to get people more engaged in learning, which could hopefully lead to more access to them volunteering or participating in a business related to the games. So again, it was all about driving change from the games. So you can see the different areas, and a lot of these are already in the IOC model. But the interesting part here, even though we were doing this, there were other partners delivering other parts of legacy. So if you look at that urban brand and also the positioning, our tourism sector played a big role in that. They had a plan to leverage the games to increase tourism by double by 2015. So there was a plan in place and we worked with them. There was the COC and the CPC, Canadian Paralympic Committee, doing great work to build more people onto the podium as well. So we worked together in collaboration with the government partners, the agencies, and community organizations to really drive change. Again, there were lots of different programs, and I can go into the various programs and talk about them in detail. And I actually have another deck that I've had like 300 different slides of breaking them all down. But the thing is, the power of the Olympics allows you to dream and allows your citizens to dream about how they want to engage, how they want to get inspired by these games to take action in a positive way. There's one story I want to share. We had one program where a snowboard manufacturer came to us. They weren't a sponsor of the Olympics or our games, but they really had a program they wanted to see happen in British Columbia. In our conversation, we said, we can do that, but we can't give you any brand recognition. We don't want to be the one that's offside with the IOC, but we can do a program. And they said, well, we do it in 2 years. Our team put it together in 3 months that we had this program up and running. We had the international freight forward for the IOC, get the goods and bring them to Vancouver. We had the Vancouver School Board identify the students who would best benefit from this. The Cypress Mountain, which hosted the freestyle skiing, provided free tickets and hosting ability and instruction. And we had this program up and running. Now, the interesting thing there is the power of this program was to learn how to snowboard, but more importantly, it was to learn about the values of life, about perseverance and commitment and dedication. And there was one young woman who went through, and she was living on and off the streets, in and out of homes, foster homes, not going to school that often. She got into this program, and she went through, and she just fell in love with snowboarding. We had another program that we funded up at Whistler called Chill, which allowed people to learn to get into the snowboarding industry. And one of our partners, the Royal Bank of Canada, also sponsored that. This girl went up to that program. A year later, she was fully employed, living in Whistler, and said this changed her life. There's many stories across all Olympic Games like this, but it's really important to know the value and how this can drive change. So again, before the torch was lit, this is the impact we had in British Columbia. Our population is about 5 million, not the size of the US or LA. But it's interesting in that, in the 10 years of change leading up to the games, 2 million people benefited. We had a school program where we got kids to have physical activity in the school when the teachers were empowering them to jump. Or again, we had 595,000 kids a year benefiting from that. We had children engaged in literacy programs. We were very diverse, and the interesting part is we were in 400 communities, and we did 12,500 programs. Some programs we created from scratch with our partners. Others we found that were going already in doing a good job. How do we scale them and use the Olympic brand to get more attention and more revenue to help them do more as they move forward? Now, the interesting part is we decided to make a strategic decision in 2008 on how we were going to handle our legacy. We were going to transition all our programs out to community groups and allow them to carry on the programs, the delivery, and own that in their heart, delivering the legacy. It took us 3 years to actually transition the programs. It took us to about 2013, but we had all our programs transitioned out that could be transitioned. We gave IP away, we gave funding away, we gave staff away to these organizations. And I'm proud to say 10 years after, there's only 3 programs that I know that are no longer going forward. But again, I think they became irrelevant just because technological change and other things. We did set up 2 agencies to make sure our 2 biggest areas would carry on in a bigger way and to allow more capacity to keep the spirit alive of the games, but also in particular sport. We set up Dakota, which was a literacy agency. 10 years after the game, 1.6 million people in British Columbia have benefited from legacy programs. And we set up Via Sport, a new sport agency that was brought together in the sports sector to deliver a better solution for our citizens, easier pathways to get engaged with sport, and to get more British Columbians onto the podium. 10 years after, now 38% of the Canadian Olympic team have a connection to British Columbia. So the legacy is alive. The other part we decided is that legacies now, with our learning, we learned how to do collaboration. We learned how to help organizations scale, that we would actually transform or pivot into a new organization called Lift Impact Partners. And what we do is we try and help organizations who deliver health, education, and skills development scale their impact across the country so they can help more Canadians thrive, especially those that are the most vulnerable and at risk. And so our journey in 2011 to 2021 has allowed us to help 65 organizations really scale their impact. We've done some really interesting sport programs as well, tied to the Olympics. When Sochi was launched, we did a national challenge in Canada to find ideas for better health outcomes. We did that with 2 of the sponsors of the games. We ended up having a TV show where Canadians got to vote on the best idea. And again, it was all about the Olympic values coming through about the importance of health and well-being and education. And we had many Olympians be the spokespeople for these initiatives. But again, we've done work from coast to coast to coast. And in particular, we're finding for new immigrants or new Canadians or those at risk in inner city, we can find organizations that can really drive social change, invest in them so they're stronger, and we're seeing great results. We can see from this results that organizations are scaling their impact. They're in 75% more communities. They're seeing 81% growth in their revenues. They're seeing much different, 1.6 million people benefiting from it. The interesting part about this work is when I'm looking at some of the future games, such as in Italy, they have a challenge right now, people leaving the mountains and coming into the city. How do they keep employment there? I think if you take some of the learnings from our model as we transitioned, you can create some employment solutions that the games can be the trigger for as well, based around sport, around other things that's important to the community. But the big part here is it's the learning about is transformational change both from the games, but as an organization, you need to keep moving forward as well to really see what is possible. Our organization would not be around at all if it hadn't been for hosting the 2010 Games in Vancouver. And we were inspired every day to get up and make sure we could make our citizens better, stronger, and do it in partnership. So throughout this conference, I'm so pleased to hear it is about coming together, partnering together. Each edition builds off each other. I was sitting back and smiling a little bit inside, and it wasn't our organization that was a trigger for this, but listening to Paris and about some of their programs. We did some similar things, but in a different way. When we set up our organization, we scanned all past games to see what they promised and what they delivered. What could we learn from these additions? I think conferences like this really allow us to come together, learn, and build unbelievably strong together. We're coaching each other, and together we're going to make a much bigger difference. Again, I want to thank everyone for their time. And again, I want to make sure we have some time for questions as well. Thank you.
Thank you for that great presentation. And our final speaker today, Aram Kim from the Pyeongchang 2018 Legacy Foundation. So without further ado.
Morning, everybody. So I think everybody had like a reception last night and you all know each other, but I wasn't there, unfortunately. So I just want to introduce myself. So it's strange. I'm from Pyeongchang, but kind of speak with an Australian accent. So I grew up in Australia. And also want to shout out, I think my wife's watching me. For 2 weeks, I haven't been home, so she's seen me online twice. So last time she said I looked a little chubby, but hopefully today it's a little better. Yeah. So anyway, I'm from the Pyeongchang Legacy Foundation. I think from LA and Vancouver, we're the newest kid on the block. We opened our doors in 2019, right when COVID hit us. So I just want to go through a journey today of how our youth engagement program went from a staff of 4 people with maybe $100,000 to currently a staff of 4 people, but with $7 million. And how I think youth engagement is a very important intangible legacy that a lot of people kind of skips over. And hopefully today I can give you some more insight into it. So I work with the government. Our foundation is very unique where we do have the surplus from the games that we put into a fund, and we use the profits from that fund as operational expenses. And then we work with the government to get grants for our different programs. So this keeps us on our toes where we have to keep coming up with good ideas that can impact the local community or the country as a whole. If we don't do that, we just don't get funding. But the problem we face is, as with all organizations, everybody looks for short-term goals, but obviously intangible benefits are long-term. And that's something that when we do our operational planning that we always have to think. So what we do is we're not deceptive, but we do have short-term goals, which are numbers, but then also that we have long-term goals that we don't really share until we have the results later on. So I just want to keep, that's why I put this on the first slide, because I think this is something that a lot of organizations that work for the government needs to know. So my journey started in 2015 at the Pyeongchang Olympic Committee. Actually, my background is not youth engagement, but it was actually HRM, so HRD. So I worked with human resource development, and I applied for POCOG because I had a position. But then when I first arrived, they said, well, Aaron, we're setting up an education team, and we would like you to be part of it. So I had a budget of less than $100,000 for 3 years to run the youth engagement program. Had a lot of fruitful discussions with our finance team, but I remember the director said to me, why do we need education for the Olympic Games? The games should be about the competition, it should be about ticket sales, it should be, we should have a good sporting event. So we had a lot of issues, and everything we did, actually, we ran in-house. We decided we had 2 options, do nothing, or we'd do everything in-house. So our team of 4 great people, we came up with a plan, and within 3 years, this is what we achieved. We engaged over 7 million youth in Korea. Out of the 7 million, we had 1.4 million that we met directly. And we did this through various activities, but one of the most important one was school visits. School visits were something that we could go directly to schools and engage with students that didn't cost us money. What we did was we used the POCOG employees, and we realized very early that in Korea, sport is still very elite. So it's either you become an elite athlete or you don't really play sport. And that was the mentality that Korea had, and I think Pyeongchang kind of really changed that. And so what we did was, in our school visits, we didn't just do sport, but we brought POCOG employees from various different functions, and they gave presentations about, for example, I designed the mascot. I'm a designer, but now I work in the sports industry. I'm a lawyer, but now I work in the sports industry. So we opened doors for Korean athletes and youth to say, look, it's not just about athletes and coaches. There's any industry can be matched with the sporting industry. And I remember two very distinct incidents where, number one, I remember an athlete that was, she was a taekwondo athlete. She took part in our program, and she had made like huge injuries in her leg, and she had to give up sport. And she came up to me after our program, started crying, saying, I thought my connection to the sport industry was over. But after hearing from, the POCOG employees and taking part in your program, I've got a vision now. I can, start, studying to be a designer or something else and keep working. So I think in these ways, these engagement programs really do make a change to the lives of young people. And the other thing that we need to focus on is, from purely an economic perspective, young people are our future. They're our future athletes. They're future spectators. They're ticket makers. So I think in this way, we can also engage with our sponsors and get, not have to use government money or our money, and engage with sponsors and work responsibly to engage with students. So this is just a rough breakdown, but I mean, this is what we did in Pyeongchang. We were pretty busy, but just to, sum it all up, what this really achieved and why this led to the Legacy Foundation now focusing on youth engagement is our program directly resulted in 55,000 students buying tickets for the Pyeongchang Olympic Games, and also 56,000 students buying tickets for the Paralympic Games. I remember the Paralympic ticketing office coming up to me and saying, what did you do? Because our Paralympic ticket sales went up 25% in a day. And we realized that was the day that we sent out the email to all the schools saying the Paralympic tickets are now open. So, I mean, in that regards, that did really make a big difference. And I just want to, again, highlight how, engagement online and offline does make a difference with the Olympic movement. So, we're here now. I will now work at the Legacy Foundation. I'm head of education and youth engagement. As you can see, our main activities, number one, is now promoting Olympic values through education. And I think this is a direct relation to what we did in Pyeongchang, and that's the relationship. Our second mission is to promote peace through Pyeongchang 2018, because as you know, it was didn't really pan out right now, but at the time, North Korea engaged with South Korea, and we had the two unified team. Peace was a very big momentum for us, and we want to keep using the Olympic movement to keep that momentum going. And third was to keep a promise. When we bid for the Olympic Games in 2011, we promised that we would create a new horizons in winter sport, which meant we wanted to create new winter sporting nations within Asia. So these are the three promises that our three missions. And right now, I just want to give you a quick overview of what we're doing and how we're doing. But like I said, we opened in 2019. And then we planned, and we were about to open in 2020, do our activities. I remember I met Bruce, and we were talking about what we were doing, and then COVID hit. It was very interesting. It was interesting times, but we were able to adapt. And so what we did was we kept a lot of the programs that were successful during the Pyeongchang Games. For example, we still run our school visit programs. Every year we go to 300, 400 schools. And actually COVID helped us in this because of COVID, we couldn't bring students to our venues because our venues were closed. So we took our venues to them. And I believe that during 2020, we were probably the only organizations that were doing school activity, engaging schools, because everybody else were kind of too afraid to spread COVID. But we took the plunge and we went through it. And then our second program is our Suorang and Bandabi youth camps. And this is our the biggest funded program that we have. This is $5 million a year, where we bring in 10,000 youth from all over Korea to come to Pyeongchang. And this is because our venues, we thought, our venues shouldn't be just open to elite athletes or any athletes. It should be open to the youth. And so we bring 10,000 students the 3-day camps where they try different sports initiation for 3 days. And our hope, and where we said, leading up to my first comment, where we said we have the target, which is 10,000 students, but then our sub-target is we want at least 1 or 2% of these athletes, these students, to continue with winter sport. And originally, we thought out of the 10,000 students that apply for this program would be within Seoul or Gyeonggi province, where 50% of the population live. But we realized up to 65% of applicants are actually students from down south, where there is no snow facilities. And we talked to the schools and we asked them, you know, it's a 5-hour bus ride. Why did you apply for this? And they said, well, our students have no opportunity to engage with winter sport, and your program is perfect for this. It's something new, something fresh. So, you know, our Suodang Bandabi youth camps have been a huge success. We had some issues during COVID, but now we're back on track. This year, we had just over 20,000 students participate in our program. And then lastly, we have the educational web portal. And this web portal we designed in Pyeongchang, where we realized Korean students, they don't know anything about winter sport. They don't know the rules, and they don't know the equipment. And the problem is, if they don't know about that, they won't watch it, or they won't do it, they won't engage in it. So we made a website with sports videos, lesson plans, printed handouts, where the teacher can do absolutely nothing and just go into our website, download the content, and boom, use the content in their classroom. And through this, we also do educational workshop with teachers to teach them how to use our programs. And this way, we feel that, you know, students, teachers, now they get a slight more interest in winter sport than before. The other events that we do is international events. We've worked with the International Olympic Truth Committee Foundation for the Imagine Peace Youth Camp. But this was run in Greece, and we kind of worked with them, had an MOU, and we brought the program back to Korea. This is engaging youth leaders from around the world, and we teach them about, you know, how to develop programs and how to use sport as a peacemaker in the local communities. And then after the program, they're designed to go back to their communities and run sport-based programs. We also run the Pyeongchang Peace Forum, which is a forum that we run on the anniversary of the Pyeongchang Games. And this is actually very important because, like I said, we wanted to keep the peace dialogue going every year. And finally, we talk about the new horizons in winter sport, creating new winter sport nations. The DREAM program is a program that the government has been running since 2004. I don't know if you know, we bid 3 times before we won the Pyeongchang Games, Vancouver, yeah, Sochi. But when we bid for the games, we promised that we would create new winter sporting nations. And the DREAM program was when we bid for the 2010 games, we started this program where we bring 100 to 150 athletes from countries without snow to come to Korea and learn winter sport from Korean coaches. We've also successfully completed New Horizons Sliding Champion, which is because there's only 2 sliding centers in Asia. We thought this would be a great opportunity to increase sliding nations within the Asian community. And this is a funded program where we had 14 athletes from 4 countries come to Korea, train for 2 years, and try to get into the Beijing Olympic Games. And then lastly, right now, we have the New Horizons Academy, which is the 2.0 of the New Horizons Academy, which is focused on the Gangwon Games. And we're bringing 100 students from around the world to try to teach them winter sport and try to qualify for the Gangwon 2024 Games. Now, obviously, we are in a unique position where now we're transitioning into Gangwon 2024. And I just want to highlight here that I know the IOC in their legacy mandate, it says, you know, legacy starts before the games and it runs through the games and continues after the games. And I think our education youth engagement program indirectly kind of followed that model. We didn't get that direction at the time, but we started during the game, before the games. Now it's a big focus for the games, after the games. We're starting that over again for Gangwon 2024 now. So we're working closely with the organizing committee. So when we write the edition plans or we write any plans, our foundation is part of the discussions. And right now the agreement is after Gangwon 2024, our foundation will take over now the legacy of the games. But we don't want to create something new. We want to be simple. We have successful programs now. So what we want to do is we just want to leverage our current programs and then incorporate the Kangwon 2024 aspect. So, I mean, this will save money, save manpower, but also have the same effect. So this is the plan that we're running right now. I just want to finish off, because this is about intangible legacies, about some of the intangible benefits that we've received with some of our programs. And that's, oh, sorry, before that, what has, I forgot the most important part. So what has our foundation achieved in the last 3 years? And I was surprised because I actually didn't, I usually do this at the end of the year, but I did it a little earlier because of this presentation. But through our foundation's various programs that I explained to you, we have now 4 new social businesses that are owned by retired athletes that are opened in Pyeongchang. These businesses started off by being part of our program, and then they worked with us. And then I know Tanya introduced us with the Yunus Sports Hub. And the Yunus Sports Hub is a social business themed organization, and we worked with them, and we introduced the Yunus Sports Hub to our retired athletes, and they've worked together to create these new social businesses. We also now have 3 youth winter sports clubs, and this is exciting because usually sports in Korea in the youth level is played at schools. They're usually sports teams. But this is actually a really unique case where now private entities are opening sports clubs for anybody to join. And then we also have new winter sporting in Southeast Asian nations through our various programs. So through our New Horizons, we have Cambodia, Thailand, Vietnam, and Malaysia. They created new national federations and participating in our competitions. And finally, you know, our sliding center can be seen as a white elephant, but now all the press has been very positive because of our programs where we're getting new international competitions. We signed a MOU with the IBSF to run competitions at our venue for the next 5 years. So these are the achievements that we've achieved, and hopefully next time we meet, we can give you some more information. But getting back, so our New Horizons Sliding Champion program is considered by the government was considered by the government to be a failure because our original goal was for the athletes to compete at Beijing 2022. And we had these 14 athletes from these 4 countries, and they were brand new athletes, first time sliding, and in 2 years we trained them and we took them to international competitions. We chose sliding because of the sliding center, but also because we won medals there in the sliding event. We also promoted gender equality, where out of the 14 athletes, 7 had to be female, 7 were male. And then we used retired Korean bobsleigh skeleton athletes as coaches for this program. Unfortunately, well, we had a Vietnamese and Cambodian girl, 2 girls that actually were like this close to getting into Beijing. But in the last competition, they both got COVID. And they weren't able to compete. And obviously, without the points, they weren't able to go into Beijing 2022. I remember I got a lot of flack from everybody because from the government perspective, everybody was expecting that result. Now, it's completely different, and they're funding me more because what we've achieved through this program, which ended in January, which we're seeing the outcomes now, is we have 4 new federations that like Korea now, put it politely. They love Korea. So what happened with that was one of the Korean Bobsleigh Skeleton Federation president applied to be the vice president of the International Federation, and he was elected in July. And I think he believes, and everybody believes, the direct relation to that was because we were helping all these developing nations in sliding sport. We also now have the international competitions where in March next year, we'll have the first ever Asian Championships in bobsleigh and skeleton to be opened in, and it will be opened in Korea. And with that, we've been promised maybe 200 athletes will be turning up. So these are some indirect, benefits that we can get from these programs. And I just want to finish off by saying that, everybody likes numbers. They like, Olympic Games, or they want to, you compete, or you've engaged 10,000 students or 100,000 students. For us, it's difficult to gauge how much of a positive impact we're making at the moment because we've been only running for 2 years. But for what we're doing right now is after every program, we're actually getting all our participants to sign a waiver saying that we can contact them in 5 or 10 years. And our plan starting in 2026 is to re-engage with these people and do surveys and interviews to see how much of an impact socially it has made for them. And I hope that, you don't, I just want to say that it's not, the initial outcome's not, is important, but you also need to think long-term on how you want to get the KPIs. I don't know if my presentation made any sense, but thank you for your time.
Thank you, Aram. Great presentation, and always great to hear about all the great work from the foundation. I don't know if I mentioned, but I also worked in Pyeongchang. So Aram was the Australian heading the education, and the spokesperson was Canadian. That's me. So was always kind of funny at the Pyeongchang organizing committee. We are running a little late, but I feel that there might be a question for some of our speakers. So if we could just have our speakers just for maybe a few minutes to take any questions that anybody might have, I think that would be worth taking the time. So again, great presentations from our very distinguished speakers, and so good to hear about all of the great work, the tremendous amount of work being done as a result of the Olympic Games, and all that we can do for using the power of sport to transform lives. So much work has been done. Do we have a question? I feel okay. So maybe the gentleman here first, and then afterwards. Go ahead. Maybe could you stand, because there's cameras at the back.
I have a question for Renata and a question for Bruce.
Please use the microphone.
Renata,
Maybe use the mic there, because this is being broadcast.
Renata, thank you for your impressive and inspiring presentation and for the amazing results the LA 84 Foundation displays strongly after 40 years almost in process and going. With the 2028 games on the horizon, what is your vision about connecting, unifying the LA 84 Foundation and what LA 2028 brings along?
I'll let my colleague Eric answer that question. I think, I heard President Bach speak in Rome a couple of weeks ago at the Vatican, and he introduced the concept of the new Olympic model, higher, faster, stronger, together. And so, we're a collaborator, and I think it makes sense to have one Olympic legacy in Los Angeles. And so that, is the position that I operate from. Certainly LA 28 has to bring, all that they have to bring to put on the games. They've already started their legacy ahead of the games with $160 million invested, as President Bach talked about yesterday, to not to be in our lane, but to enhance, an opportunity for young people to engage in sport and play. And so, I think we're going to take our cue from President Bach and work together.
Thank you, Renata. Bruce, for you, there's no doubt that the 2020 Vancouver Winter Olympic Games had extraordinary impact on the state of British Columbia, the communities, youth, and very impressive numbers you have displayed in the legacy that you implemented over the last decade. I know this might be a little bit speculative, but what do you feel the legacy of the 2010 impact will be in bringing back the games to Vancouver one day?
I think we'll have to wait and see.
I think Dragomir's a rebel riser here.
Yeah. I think, whatever city has bids for 2030, right now a lot of them have passed games and they're going to bring their legacy to bear. And I think it's now in the new norm, the 20+5. You have an ability to tell a new story, but the legacy will play in it for all people who are bidding. So I think, the IOC members will decide which is the best one, and that's how it'll happen.
Thank you. I think we have time for just one more question. I think there was a question. Can we get the mic?
Thank you. Congratulations for your presentations. Very inspiring. Which advice can you give to OCOGs to succeed the transition to maintain high ambition and legacy just after the Games?
Well, perhaps Pyeongchang was the most recent game, so we could...
I highly advise that, like I said, that your legacy planning starts before the games, and that planning is incorporated for during the games and after the games. To be honest, we had a 1-year gap during our legacy preparation where our games ended in 2018, and then our foundation was founded in 2019. And I feel that 1 year was a wasted opportunity for us. And I know now the IOC are strongly suggesting that, we start before the games. And that's I think, the best advice I can give you, and make sure that all the funding, all the partners, the government, they're all involved in the planning process. It's not just the OCOG planning, because it's the city, it's the central government, Ministry of Sport. There's many different entities that need to be a part of this. So I hope that helps.
And if I could add, in the United States, Los Angeles is a bit different in that we privately finance our games, and so there's very little government intervention. But as I said in my presentation, I think in terms of sustaining our work over nearly 40 years now, having invested our money into the public markets, and being patient and using the investment income on an annual basis to operate our work, has really been the reason we were gifted Keep On Giving. And so, I really encourage those, to the extent that you can, look at harnessing fundraising opportunities, but then investing that into an endowment. And without that, I don't believe that we would have preserved our legacy for as long as we have.
Yeah, I'm just going to echo what both people said. I think it's critical to start planning at least 2 years in advance with your stakeholders and partners. And depending on who the funders are going to be, get them engaged now. Make that commitment well before the games, before the flame goes out, because again, people's priorities change, especially if government's the partner. So get them to engage now. And I think the other part too is, again, if there is a fund available, how are you going to use that, and divide it up now or whatever the plan is before it gets to games time. And then in our case in Vancouver, we set up an operating trust for the venues, because we did not want the venues not to be used coming out of the games. And so our money went towards that. That was pre-written in actually in the bid phase, that commitment. So again, everyone spends that money differently, but from your role, I'd be sitting down now and getting them to commit.
Thank you. Thank you to our speakers again today for taking the time to present this great information. We'll just take a few minutes to do the resetting of the stage here. So don't go too far. So we'll start in just a few minutes. Thank you. ask everyone to please take their seats and we can get started. A lot of very exciting discussion going on, I know, but we need to start the next session. I don't think we have enough time for the Q&A session. Yes, I'll tell it now. So we will begin our last session for this morning, Legacy Governance, Multi-Stakeholder Collaboration. So this morning we're going to hear about the experiences and best practices of London 2012. First off, we have a video presentation by Felicity Appleby, who is the Mayoral Director of Political and Public Affairs for London 2012. So we'll hear the presentation first by video.
Hello, and thank you for having me to speak today. I'm sorry I could not be there in person, but I'm thrilled to be able to talk to you about London's legacy, which began many years before the delivery of London 2012. The bid and plans were developed under the very first Mayor of London, executed under the next, and enhanced by today's Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan. London has delivered a wide range of legacies from the Games, covering transport infrastructure, housing, international investment, economic regeneration, major events, and sports development. Each of these different legacies requires a different group of partners and stakeholders in order to succeed. One of the keys to London's success is that the legacies were pre-planned. Prior to construction, the post-event use of the park was already agreed, so that the plans and partners for housing were already in place. Delivering the transformation on the park has been done as a partnership with LLDC and Lee Valley Regional Park Authority, both of whom are represented at this conference. The Queen Elizabeth Olympic Park is perhaps the most internationally recognised legacy from the Games. Thousands of jobs have been created and 11,000 new homes in the wider area have now been completed. In contrast to other Olympic hosts, 95% of London's 2012 permanent venues remain operational. The pool is open to the public, the velodrome is open to cyclists of all levels, and the park attracts 6 million visitors every year. We've also seen inspirational stories from the Games. Desiree Henry was one of 7 teenagers who helped light the torch at the climax of the opening ceremony. 4 years later, she became an Olympic medalist in Rio, attributing her experience of London 2012 with her future success. While 10 years might seem like a long time, the scale of the park means we are still developing and delivering this legacy. One of the most exciting upcoming developments is the opening of East Bank. The East Bank will be one of the world's largest cultural districts and will bring together global cultural brands, including the BBC, Sadler's Wells, and the V&A. It is estimated that it will bring an additional 1.5 million visitors to the park and create more than 2,500 new jobs. Sadiq Khan was elected Mayor of London in 2016 and is proud leader of the legacy and wants to utilise London's immediate past to look forward. Whilst continuing to deliver the plans that are in place, we need to ensure that they are also adapted to the needs of Londoners as the city evolves. Sadiq wants to ensure that London remains the sporting capital of the world. Staging the Olympics and Paralympics gave London the venues and skills required, but has also given us confidence and an understanding in order to continue to deliver the world's biggest events, which we have continued to do so. On the park, 5 of the original venues from the Olympics are still being used for community activities and elite sporting events. In these venues, we have staged events such as the UCI World Track Cycling Championships, the Women's Hockey World Cup, and the European Swimming Championships, as well as the IAAF World Athletics Championships, the IPC World Para-Athletic Championships, the first time these events were staged in the same venue and city. Earlier this year, London acted as a satellite host for the Commonwealth Games, with the track cycling events for Birmingham 2022 taking place in the Velodrome. Securing and delivering these events has been done in partnership with national governing bodies of sport, UK Sport and the UK Government, as well as our partners on the park. Other venues, not built specifically for the Games, but still utilised, include the O2, ExCeL, Wembley Arena and our other stadiums, all of which continue to host international sports and entertainment events on a regular basis. London has proudly secured a number of American franchise events for the city. In 2019, Tottenham Stadium signed a 10-year partnership with the NFL to bring 2 fixtures a year to London, and we were thrilled when earlier this year MLB announced they would bring baseball back to our city. We are looking forward to continuing to work with stakeholders as the infrastructure on the park develops, and we utilise the facilities to stage events that both enhance London's position as a sporting capital of the world and continue to provide entertainment for all Londoners. Thank you so much for having me to speak today, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the conference.
Next, I'd like to introduce Michelle May, the Director of Inclusive Growth, Education and Skills from London 2012.
I was hoping I got away with not putting the mic in there now. So. Morning, everybody. This is two nights without sleep and lots of Korean fried chicken. So wish me luck, guys. Wish me luck. Anyway. Firstly, as other speakers have said, can I just thank everyone who was involved in organising this fantastic event. It's my first time here in Korea and I'm just loving it, so thank you. And along with my other 3 colleagues and Felicity on film from London, it's a real honour to represent the city in what is our 10th anniversary year. So it's really exciting. Thank you. As I say, it's been really inspiring to meet you all and to just hear the stories, your legacy stories, and also your plans for those cities who follow us. And I think since listening to the various speeches over the last day or so, what's particularly struck me was that I think, Nancy, you said it actually yesterday, that with Korea, there was this watershed moment of sort of pre the Olympic Games and then after the Olympic Games in '88. And that made me think about the legacy of London, and particularly how the Games was really a game changer, I suppose, for a part of the city that had long been neglected. And I know Sean talked about that a little bit in his presentation yesterday. East London, my hometown, so I'm very proud of it, had suffered from major deindustrialisation during the 1970s and 80s. So again, a bit like some of the stories we heard from Korea yesterday. And, you know, perceptions were that it wasn't really a great place to live, to work, to enjoy. Those of us who knew East London really well, I think, always felt that, you know, there was much more sort of promise and opportunity and potential for the area. But those who didn't know it as well had a much more sort of negative perception. And that negativity rubbed off, I think, and affected the communities that lived and live in East London. And so I think the London 2012 Games brought much needed investment to the area. Again, as Sean had pointed out in his presentation, but perhaps as significantly, hosting such a successful mega event. I mean, it went really well. People loved coming to East London and everything worked. And I think that just brought a level of confidence to the community. And I think that confidence has been the key to the success of our legacy ever since. And as we heard again yesterday from some of our Korean colleagues, our regeneration plans then that we have for legacy, I think originally we'd had like a plan to a sort of a leisurely approach to 2030. And following the sort of success of those 2012 Games, we really accelerated that delivery. And I think, again, that's been one of the sort of the key successes. So a bit about who we are. So the London Legacy Development Corporation, my organisation, was formed just before the Games in 2012. And we were there to ensure that our legacy bid promises were delivered. And we were given all of the necessary powers. So we're the landowner for Queen Elizabeth Olympic Park, we're the planning authority, and we're the master developer, so to speak. And we're also a regeneration agency. So all of the powers that you would need in your toolbox, really, to make things happen. Our board includes the elected mayors and leader of the 4 local boroughs that make up the East London area that the Queen Elizabeth Olympic Park sits in. And I think in terms of sort of stakeholders and governance, that's been a really sort of key ingredient for us, because our legacy plans, particularly those related to the socio-economic revival of the area, are very much shaped by local priorities. And so that's sort of key. And then alongside our board, we've invested heavily in a programme of community engagement to ensure that our plans are shaped and owned by the people who will be most affected by our work. And so perhaps one of our biggest successes in this area was the formation of the Legacy Youth Voice, a young, diverse group bursting with ideas and insights who are helping to shape the future of the park and are creating opportunities for other young East Londoners. Formed 4 years prior to the 2012 Games, the project harnesses young people's interest and enthusiasm and enables them to make a really valuable contribution to the ongoing regeneration of their hometown. And then from that wider Legacy Youth group, we have a Legacy Youth Board, which is made up and led by a dedicated group of 18 to 25-year-olds, unified by a shared home in the host boroughs of Hackney, Newham, Tower Hamlets and Waltham Forest. And they represent diversity in age, ethnicity, gender and lived experiences, and bring an alternative perspective to our main board that helps to inform crucial decisions for the future of the area. Our mission is to use the once-in-a-lifetime opportunity of the London 2012 Games and the creation of Queen Elizabeth Olympic Park to develop a dynamic new heart for East London, creating opportunities for local people and driving innovation and growth in London and the UK. And this idea that the communities who hosted the 2012 Games should benefit most from it remains at the very heart of what we do. And the priority for our borough partners and key local stakeholders that we focus our efforts around creating a wide range of high quality careers in the area, because until the Games, I think East London had, as I said earlier, really been suffering from a sort of a lack of good quality career opportunities, unlike sort of the rest of the city. And also that along with that job creation, that we work with local partners to create clear pathways into those jobs for local people, which is critical. I think Felicity's already covered some of this in her film, so I won't say too much more than this, other than for those of you who do know East London, to be able to list some of the sort of the global brands that she talked about in her film, the V&A Museum, Sadler's Wells, the BBC, University College London, and London College of Fashion. Just huge global brands come into an area that, you know, before that could have only sort of dreamt of these things. It's a real sort of pinch yourself moment. So, you know, these global brands join Here East and Plexel, which are located in the former Press and Broadcast Centre, who have brought thousands of jobs in really high growth, high quality sectors, and a significant number of startup businesses to the area. And all of this has helped the park to become a thriving innovation district. And we've recently launched Shift, which is our attempt at the first truly inclusive innovation district partnership and programme. And I believe that our first partnership that we announced at our Shift launch earlier in the summer was with KITA, a South Korean international trade association. So we're really proud about that. We've always known that if we deliver on our mission of ensuring that the legacy benefits local communities most, then creating jobs in the park in itself is not enough. to make those opportunities really accessible to local people who we've had to invest a lot of our time and resource since 2012 in working with local community organisations, schools, colleges, universities, employers and local people themselves to co-design a range of initiatives to inspire our young people, their parents and teachers about the breadth of career opportunities on their doorstep. And alongside that, we've designed and delivered a number of training programs and apprenticeships which give local people access to the networks, the knowledge and the know-how to secure those opportunities. I talked in my introduction about people's perceptions of East London as a challenging place, a place characterised by need rather than opportunity, and also how the global spotlight of the 2012 Games had begun to change how the world saw us. And to some extent, I think how we saw ourselves. And this has been a really important turning point in our legacy journey because it's changed the regeneration narrative from one pre-2012 that focused on how deprived East London was to one where we're focusing on our opportunity and potential. And this change has been really important to our local stakeholders and communities who didn't often recognise themselves or their hometown in that description. And what we have seen by this change in narrative is that all of these world-class institutions I mentioned earlier are choosing to make their park their home because as well as giving them space to grow, which is in London is challenging, it gives them space to look at other sort of growth in terms of who their new audiences might be, to widen participation in terms of the sorts of students that are coming to study at the universities, to sort of shape their offices as theatres and museums, and to diversify their workforce. And I just had a sort of quote there because this is about much more of a reciprocal relationship between local partners and incoming organisations. And that whilst we often talk about through legacy or other economic development or urban renewal programmes, that things are about transforming a place and a people and about things being done too. This reciprocal relationship where actually it's a much more of a sort of a beneficial relationship to individuals who take up job opportunities and study at world-class institutions, but also to those institutions who have the opportunity to be shaped by the communities and the place that they are moving into. And that's been a really, really big part of our legacy journey. I just wanted to sort of give a few numbers because everybody has, and I know that they're sort of important, but just since 2012, over 20,000 people have worked on the park. We've had over 500 young people training as apprentices, and approximately 3,000 school children each year are engaged in our sort of programmes. And there's lots more to come. And I suppose it takes me back to a point that Tanya made yesterday and also Aaron was making this morning, just that, 10 years on, the park is still evolving. And I think when we look at how long it takes to prepare for a bid, to actually stage in a games, we need to have that sort of long-term lens when we look at legacy. And I suppose another thing, just reflecting again on what was discussed yesterday, just being really honest and mature in that sort of bidding process about what legacy can deliver, but as importantly, what it isn't there to deliver. Because I think when you're working with local organisations and local stakeholders, if you promise too much at the beginning and you really can lose people if those things are never actually deliverable. So just being really clear about what local priorities are, grounding it in the place. And then from there, sort of building really long-term sustained relationships. And I think that for us we're still on that journey, I think, but it's been very much key to our success. So I'm going to leave you with a short film that we commissioned as part of our anniversary celebrations. So I hope you'll see it as a bit of a celebration of the magic of 2012, all that has followed, and most importantly, what's to come. Thank you.
Aaron's going to make it 2 goal medals for Great Britain.
We lit the flame and we lit up the world. The spirit of these Olympics will inspire a generation.
Is the fastest man on the planet.
When our time came, Britain, we did it right.
The London 2012 Games left a unique legacy at the Queen Elizabeth Olympic Park. But there's so much more here than the memory of a single sporting summer. Over the last decade, the park has become one of the UK's largest attractions. Now the park is moving into a new phase by offering exciting opportunities for investment and sponsorship. Welcome to the Park of Possibilities. The park is already well established as a destination for sport and culture, but now an increasing number of world-renowned institutions are creating the new cultural district of artistic endeavours and excellence being established on the East Bank. And it's become the fastest growing educational hub in the UK, attracting more commercial and retail businesses, creating over 33,000 new jobs, over 30,000 new homes, and an estimated 10 billion of economic benefit for the local area. What's more, everything is underpinned by environmental sustainability, a continuation of our Olympic promise. Development of the park progresses as we continue towards our vision of a park for everyone. By 2025, an estimated 10 million people from all over the globe will find their way to the park every year, attending hundreds of events. This is the new beating heart of enterprise, connecting East London's 4 boroughs with the rest of the UK and the world, capitalising on the pride and legacy of 2012 and transforming the Queen Elizabeth Olympic Park into the dynamic destination of the future. This is the Park of Possibilities.
I still can't quite believe that's home, but hey, thank you everyone.
Thank you. I'd like to now call upon Ruth Hollis, the Chief Executive of London 2012.
Shahab either. We can swap if that's more helpful. So I'm Ruth Hollis, I'm Chief Executive of Spirit of 2012, and it's been lovely whilst we've been here that the word, there we go, the word spirit has been used a lot to encapsulate legacy and what we believe the legacy of the Games is. So I'd just like to again say thank you to KSPO and the IOC for bringing us all together. It's been absolutely fantastic, not just the presentations, but just to sit and talk about legacy and think about where we all are and think about where we're going. It's been a real privilege, so thank you very much for bringing us together. Before I start, I just wanted to highlight our strapline, which is investing in happiness, which we've taken a bit of flack for over the years. But it was absolutely brilliant. In one of the first presentations yesterday, Professor Lee was talking about happiness, measuring happiness. Oh, sorry. Is that better? Oh, thank you. Sorry. Measuring subjective well-being. And our vision is about how events can leave happier people and happier places. So we're really invested in happiness. And if anybody wants to talk about happiness and measuring subjective well-being, I'm really happy to have that conversation. So in this presentation, I'm going to talk a little bit about Spirit of 2012, which is quite a different legacy body from other bodies we've heard, how we were formed and how we work in partnership to deliver some of London's legacy promises outside London. So I won't talk about London particularly, I won't talk about the park, but this is about the social legacy for the rest of the UK. And I'm going to start actually with a video.
A spectacular conclusion, and it's been lovely to have the world here enjoying London Games of 2012. I think it's been quite wonderful.
happy, and it makes me like move on.
What's happened is that I've sort of changed how I see and judge myself.
Just go and have a go. So I couldn't go back now. I'm going forward about everything what I want to do now, and I don't sit back. I just go.
Having something to look forward to every week, it just like made me feel a lot happier.
So the atmosphere, the ballet dancers, I'll never forget that experience, ever.
We got to write a song, the lyrics of our life basically, and we're very, very proud.
I didn't think at my age I would learn a new sport to boost your confidence.
I'm so like relieved and happy. I'm so like empowered. I just feel like it can't end here, man. It can't end here. There's a lot more we have to do.
Spirit has invested in lots of programmes right across the UK because what we know is once the spark is ignited, it can only continue with really sustained investment.
Thank you. And that film was made by one of our community partners in Hull that started during the UK City of Culture in Hull in 2017 and works with young carers, particularly, and young people who come through care experience backgrounds. Oh, this is me, isn't it? Changing the new one. Oh, sorry. Okay, we're on the right one. Sorry. So, Spirit of 2012 was set up just after the London Games by the National Lottery Community Fund, which is part of our National Lottery infrastructure in the UK. And the Community Fund is different because it doesn't invest in sport or arts for their own sake. The Community Fund is there to invest in communities. So we invest in sport and art for the change that they can make to people, not for sport and art itself. And the story is always that their chair was a bit of an Olympic skeptic. Wasn't really sure, many people are pre-games, but then went to see the torch relay in his own community, which was outside London, and saw how that brought people together on a very typically British rainy day. He thought he'd be the only person there with his dog, and the whole community came out to see this torch and to feel the impact. And following on from that, I think he saw across the UK the impact of the torch relay, the Cultural Olympiad. Our post office posted post boxes, gold, where we had gold medal winners right in their communities. And this was a real sense right across the UK of community pride. And that's what we were really set up to deliver. Although we were set up by the National Lottery, we are a completely independent charity. We're very small, there's only 10 of us, and we were set up with an endowment of £47 million in 2013, which is a generous amount of money. But when you say 10 to 15 years, right across the whole of the UK, art, sport, and volunteering, it's actually not a huge amount. So the way we work is to go deep. It's to learn the lessons and then to look at how other people can scale the lessons from the programmes that we've delivered. We did some recent polling and we found that actually 65% of people this year, in the 10th anniversary year, thought that London still had an impact, that the London Games still had an impact on them and their communities, and that was people right across the UK. In London, that rose to 75%. And 70% of people we surveyed were still telling us that they thought London 2012 had impacted how they see disabled people. So that's really phenomenal long-term legacy, I think, in terms of what we're here to deliver. So Spirit's primary purpose is to unlock a future where events and volunteering are a pathway to well-being for everybody. We focus on people. We're very much in the social legacy space, especially people that might be left behind. So young people, disabled people, people from left behind communities. And we do this in two ways. The first is through grant funding, and the second is through research. And again, as I've said, our endowment is generous, but it's not huge. So we aim to go deep, not wide, collect the learning and help others to scale. And because we're so small, everything we do has to be done in partnership or we wouldn't deliver it. And I think the other thing just to say about Spirit is we will close. So we were set up as a short-term fund. We will close by 2026. So we're now at the stage of just doing our final multi-year grant programs, and then we will collect the learning and we will spend out. So this next picture is from our theory of change, and it just encapsulates really what we think we're here to do. That we were set up to recreate the pride and positivity from the London 2012 Games, and we fund projects that make sure individuals and communities thrive, and that everybody can flourish. And that's right across the UK, so that's not London focused. And clearly, you can see from this, we can't do this alone. £47 million across the UK is not going to deliver this, but it's the ultimate aim of what we hope to do. So this slide just shows you some of the initiatives we funded, and we started in London, and then we've been looking to work right across the UK and work across sport and culture and volunteering. The Olympic Games are brilliant, and they were our start, but they don't come along very often. So one of the ways we decided to continue the legacy was to look at the events that were coming up in the UK and to think about how we could share that learning and share that lessons in future events. And I'll talk about a few of those as we go forward. I think Shahab is going to talk about Get Set, which is one of the kind of proudest legacy investments we've made and continues directly from the London 2012 Games, but the others don't. They come through the 2 Commonwealth Games we've held, and the 2 UK Cities of Culture that have been held since 2012. The final one, Volunteering Cities, is one of our latest initiatives. And what we've been very interested in recently actually is the bidding process and what bidding for a designation can do for a city. So every 4 years, the UK holds a UK City of Culture competition. We held one this year, and Bradford was designated as the 2025 winner. Because we won't really be grant funding in Bradford, and we've been doing lots of thinking about the bidding process, what we've done is to make money available to some of the cities that didn't get the designation to think about how they can continue to develop the volunteer offer that they put in their bid, to see how that spark of just going through the competition can still leave a legacy even if you don't get the designation. And we'll be sharing the learning of that as we go. So I just wanted to talk about 2 of the legacy promises from London and how we've continued to deliver them. The first is around activity levels, chimes very much with what Marie was saying yesterday in Paris, real physical inactivity crisis in the UK, and London 2012 promised to get 1 million more people active. And we know that, as Michelle has just said, that making big promises around legacy doesn't mean it's going to happen, and it doesn't always work. So, you know, some people will take up a new sport from watching an Olympic or Paralympic Games, but we feel you're really unlikely to touch the very least active, and that's what you need in terms of closing those health inequalities and addressing the public health crisis inactivity is causing. And you need to take a different route than the if you build it, they will come. We've got nearly 15 million people in the UK classed as inactive, and it costs £7.4 billion a year. So that's an annual cost to the NHS and our public services, almost as much as it costs to deliver London. So it's a hugely important legacy to continue to strive for. Disabled people are a significantly inactive group in the UK, as I'm sure they are in many countries. And because of our Paralympic heritage, we wanted inclusion to be at the heart of the work we did. So as Rio was approaching in 2015, we started to work across sport and disability agencies to look at how we could work differently to deliver this aim. Not funding traditional sports or activity sessions, we felt there was enough supply in the market, but funding an approach to reaching and sustaining the very least active. To do this, we've built a partnership it's led by disability sports organisations, but together with sport and community organisations to deliver an approach that they call Active Together. It's about bringing disabled and non-disabled people in a really person-centred approach to be active together. There's often, you know, lots of disability sport offers and lots of traditional sport offers, but actually if you're in a family or a friendship group with a disabled child, disabled parent, disabled friend, doing something together can be quite hard to find. And that's the space really in terms of reaching the least active that we wanted to explore. It's a cross-UK project, but we couldn't hope to reach inactive people across the UK, so it focuses on very specific communities and very specific inactive groups. They're relatively small numbers, but we're very big, as I've said, on testing and learning and scalability. It's now in its 6th year, and we were delighted to welcome more funders into the partnership, and that makes it possible for us to extend the reach, both geographically and so that the learning from that programme feeds into other larger funded programmes. So for the partners, what's important? Well, the first thing is having that shared vision and purpose. They're not competing with each other for funding to deliver the initiative. There is one pot of funding. They decide how to break it down. They decide how to deliver it. Having a national partnership but working at local level has extended the capacity and reach both at the national and the local level, and gives us the ability to work really deeply in communities in a really targeted way. So to give you some examples, in Bradford, they're working with inactive Muslim women. In Liverpool, they're working with a group of young trans people. In Wales, they're working with children that aren't in school, so wouldn't have access to physical activity. So they're working at a really deep local level. But because we've got a learning partner in from the beginning, we're able to aggregate the impact and show the impact at a national level. And they're really proud to be part of it. And part of that pride is that it's an Olympic legacy project and it comes from London 2012. And even if they're very far from London, actually that spark, that magic, the stardust that a mega event can bring is very important. And you can see the impact for people. So it's not lots of people, but we can see from this that we are reaching the right people. 7 in 10 participants are classified as physically inactive. The most important thing for us is that they are sustaining that physical activity journey. They're keeping active. They've told us they feel better physically and mentally, and we can demonstrate increases in well-being and decreases in anxiety. And we've recently done some work on the social return on investment, and the programme is delivering an impressive £8 return on every pound spent. So it's not a big programme, but it's scalable, and that's where we go next. So the second legacy promise I wanted to talk about was one to inspire a generation, and you've seen that in Michelle's presentation and others. And one of the things we knew from the very beginning is that we wanted to honour London's commitment to inspire a generation. So young people have been at the heart of our decision making, first with the youth panel. We had a group, 3 groups actually, of young people from right across the UK who have been advising us and being able to make their own funding decisions. So we've delegated money to them to make their own funding decisions. As we're coming to the end of our life, or approaching the end of our life now, we no longer have that panel, but a quarter of our board, are under 30, including Kirsty, who Kirsty is from Inverness, which, for those of you that don't know UK geography, is right at the very top of Scotland before you get to the islands. And what she said was, I grew up in and out of school, struggling with my mental health. In 2012, I was given the opportunity to volunteer at the Games in London. Seeing a stadium being set up and being part of that whole experience was life-changing. So much so that 2 years later, I volunteered on the baton relay for the Commonwealth Games in Glasgow. London and Glasgow reignited my passion for sport, volunteering and working alongside people, and in 2016 I got my first job in physical activity. I would never have ended up with a career in sport if I hadn't been involved in the Games 10 years ago. Volunteering set me up and gave me the confidence I needed. And now Kirsty is a core member of our Board of Trustees. The next project I wanted to talk about very quickly was Critical Mass. So Critical Mass was developed for this year's Birmingham Commonwealth Games by Martin Green, who some of you probably will have come across at conferences like this. Martin delivered the brilliant ceremonies in London. And what he wanted to do in Birmingham was to redefine genuine inclusion for mega events with a focus on young disabled people and young people that might be excluded. And this directly came from the learning in London that didn't have an inclusive mass cast. We had a brilliant opening ceremony, and one that people look back on across the world, I think, with huge fondness. But the disabled people that took part and the young people that took part in that ceremony were largely performers already. They were not a community cast. And we wanted to see how we could bring young people from disadvantaged backgrounds, disabled young people, right into the heart of the Games. So in what they called an epic act of collaboration, They brought agencies from across Birmingham and the West Midlands together to work with over 300 young people over 14 months in the lead up to the Games, culminating with a performance in the opening ceremony. So these young people came together. They've performed all the way through. They performed at the Baton Relays and other cultural festivals, and they were at the heart of the opening ceremony of the Commonwealth Games. And I have to say, it was one of the most beautiful things I think I've seen in my career, seeing these young people perform. For the partners, this epic act of collaboration, as they called it, was again centred around a shared vision and an ambition for inclusion and excellence. It's left the regional infrastructure stronger, and the connection to a mega event has given them a spotlight and also an ambition that they wouldn't have otherwise had. And they're collectively developing a blueprint to keep the focus on quality and share the learning so that other mega events can learn from the journey they've been through. You can see how diverse the group was. And for this diverse group of young people to take centre stage at the opening ceremony of a global multi-sport event was absolutely life-changing for them. It's also changing the infrastructure of dance in Birmingham, so it will have a really long-lasting impact. So I just wanted to finish with a couple of slides on some lessons that we've picked up over the way, and actually it just resonates with everything we've heard over the last 2 days. So where you've got a time-limited organisation like an OCOG delivering legacy, you really have to work hand in glove with the organisations that will remain. And one of the really important things, as Michelle highlighted earlier, is to have a shared vision and a shared set of goals. So when we're making those big legacy promises to win a bid, that ambition and those goals have got to be shared with the people who are going to be on the ground delivering them for years to come. Those legacy goals also need to have long-term funding and long-term ownership and governance that will continue to deliver them. We need to see events as a pivot point, I think, in a change journey that goes on for a long time. So it's a positive, disruptive force rather than an end in itself. Events can have huge impacts in the place that they happen. We've seen huge impacts in London, but we've also seen the London 2012 Games have impacts right across the UK. And the social impacts we talk about are often inherently local. So I think we need to think really carefully about what the link is between the global, the national and the local. And within that complex framework of partnerships, how you'll ensure that the local partnerships are nourished to deliver the longer term aims. And finally, it sounds like really stating the obvious, but the things you need for an event are the things you're going to need beyond it. And you need to think about how you'll make the most of those intangible assets. And I think we've had some brilliant examples of that over the last couple of days. And very finally, you know, one of the key things is that you have to deliver a successful event. I think we've all seen across the world that actually the legacy conversation is very different when you have a hugely successful event. It ups the ambition, it ups the profile, and I think being ready to move and ready to feed and sustain that momentum around legacy with local partners is really important. So I've just got a few final key messages to leave you with, which I've been through. And that's everything. Thank you very much.
And our final speaker for this session and all of our legacy discussion sessions, Shahib Udin, who is the Director of Legal and Olympic Relations at the BOA.
I want to echo the sentiments from both Michelle and Ruth, and actually all the speakers. You know, it's a real privilege to be here, and thank you to KSBO and the IOC for organising this. A lot of the messages are similar. A lot of the messages here are similar, and I think watching Michelle's sort of slides and video, being a Londoner, really sort of reminded me. You know, I see the people who are inspired by London all the time, and it really is still there. You know, you see that pride. You know, 10 years on, there's a real pride of having hosted the games, and that is truly reflected still in Londoners, even though it's 10 years on. And so if any of you ever go to London, I really would encourage you to go and visit, because it's a really inspiring park and it's constantly evolving. I wanted to focus on two things, two initiatives in my presentation. As an NOC, National Olympic Committee, its legacy is very different for us. You know, we hand over our rights to the organising committee 6 years before the games, and then sort of we're a bystander for a lot of it. We take the team to the games, but actually, in many ways, you know, we watch all these other organisations come together and sort of take ownership of the games and develop the games and then deliver the games, and then the rights come back to us. And it's a really complicated landscape. You know, you sort of, there are so many stakeholders in that sort of in that world, and some of them we've never dealt with before, and then the games happens and that churns out a sort of a whole new range of stakeholders that we suddenly, as an NOC, have to work with, you know, and that includes people like Michelle, you know, and the London Legacy Park, you know, includes people like Ruth, includes government. So all of a sudden, we have all these new people that we have to work with, and we want to work with, but there isn't a framework. You know, no one provides you with this manual, you know, so after the games, this is what will happen, and this is how you work together, this is how you can collaborate together. So a lot of it you sort of learn as you go along. So one of the initiatives I want to talk about is the supplier recognition scheme, which I'm sure none of you will have heard of, and there's no reason you should have heard of it. But you know, a games doesn't happen by itself. You know, there are a huge range of businesses that make the games happen. And for London 2012, you know, there are 25,000 odd businesses who are involved directly with, in some way, with delivery of the games. But those organizations have no rights to the games. You know, we talked about the sort of the IP restrictions earlier, which are necessary to raise the sort of the commercial revenue for the games. But you have this whole sort of range of, you know, sort of range of suppliers who believe that, you know, they've also contributed to the games and to the success of the games, but they're not allowed to talk about it because of the way the games are set up. So what we developed with collaboration with the government and the IOC for the first time after games ended in London was this scheme to allow, this official scheme to allow all of these businesses who had been involved in the direct delivery of the games to be able to actually talk about it, to be able to, so their contribution could be recognized in some way, and they could benefit from the success of the games as well. And that's a really important element of hosting a games, because actually, whilst we have our sort of, you know, Olympic family and sort of Olympic sponsors and our domestic sponsors, it's really the wider family that make the games happen. And, you know, businesses, to get businesses to buy into, you know, delivering the games coming to a city, you really need to be able to say, well, how am I going to benefit from this? You know, why should I care? And so actually what this did was allow businesses to talk about what they had done for the games and that sort of how they had contributed to the success of the games. And so, you know, I think going forward, it's a great thing to be able to replicate, because actually, as we see more and more, you know, cities are having to vote to get the games awarded and host the games. So, you know, if you can actually show that these are, you know, there are actually benefits that live beyond the games, there are benefits that actually aren't just for the direct sponsors of the games, then I think that will attract sort of, you know, that will attract support for the games as, you know, as more cities bid. The other thing I wanted to talk about was, and then Ruth mentioned it, was this three words you will have seen many times. It was one of the central themes of the London bid. which Sebco sort of alluded to in his speech in Singapore. And I think it was really one of the reasons that London won the bid, because it was predicated on this sort of idea of inspiring a generation. But I don't think anyone really defined what that really meant. Was it participation? Was it actually just getting people to sort of think about the Olympics? Was it something else? So I don't think people really sort of defined it. But what London did do was create a program called Get Set, which and actually it's been fascinating because many sort of other organizations have alluded to similar programs, education programs. There was Transformer and then the Pyeongchang program. So there are lots of these education programs around. But so what London did was a program initiated was a program called Get Set, which was a program which lived during the Games. And then was handed over to the British Olympic Association after the Games. And we then grew that program as a legacy initiative of the Games. Now, it's a youth, and it's a collaboration between the BOA and the British Paralympic Association, which is Paralympics GB for those of you who aren't familiar. And it's a youth engagement program that reaches young people aged 15 to 16. A lot of the materials are sort of online. It's a sort of the teaching resources, and what it does is aims sort of to the teachers and to schools who then promote the Olympic and Paralympic values and engage with those values with young people. And I want to talk about just, so I'm conscious of time, so I want to talk about just the reach of that program. Just last year alone, it reached sort of over 400,000 pupils. It's an incredibly successful program. It has lots of different sort of programs that form part of it. So, whilst the core is called Get Set, there are lots of other initiatives that form part of it. And one of the initiatives, which Ruth kindly alluded to, is part funded by Spirit of 2012. As you all know, we've just celebrated a decade of London 2012, and and Get Set has remained relevant during that period. It's continued to engage with schools across its various programs. Some of those are sponsor funded, and some of those are funded by our other sort of stakeholders, like Spirit of 2012, Sport England, and so on. Over the last decade, we've engaged with over 30,000 UK schools, which is 93% of schools in the UK, which is a fantastic testament to the success of the program. I want to talk about Tokyo very briefly, just because it was really important to us. This was one of the programs that was funded by, done with Get Set in the last 2 years. Now, this was originally designed to be a very different program to the program it became because of the pandemic. And actually, what it taught us was that as a program, it wasn't just about inspiring the children. The way that you could inspire the children was to pivot to the families. And so actually, what the program did, because of the pandemic, was open its tools up to parents. And it was actually parents who were then using those tools to work with their children. And actually going forward, I believe that that's one of the learnings from unfortunately the pandemic, but the pandemic is that actually there are different ways that we can communicate sort of with our audience, particularly around the legacy benefits of the Games, and using the Olympic and Paralympic values to inspire people. And actually, it's not just about inspiring young people. It's about actually inspiring older people who inspire young people. So I think it was one of the fantastic learnings from the last couple of years, particularly as a result of the pandemic. I'm conscious of time, so I won't go on anymore. But what I really want, as you know, we celebrated recently the 10-year anniversary, and I just wanted to show you a short video to sort of demonstrate really that the program is still alive and kicking, and some of the kids who now benefit from the program weren't even born during the London 2012 Games. And so it still resonates with people. You know, when they see athletes bring their medals to the schools, you know, it still really resonates with people. So I just wanted to show you a very short video.
Today, we're working with our children and Get Set, looking at activities that have been designed by Get Set to develop their sports skills and interaction with each other. Working with Get Set has enabled us to encourage our children and keep them invested in sport and PE. Looking back to 2012, there are many highlights to the Games. It was fantastic to see everybody coming together, that sense of pride. It was an amazing opportunity, and many of our children were able to go and witness that as well, which inspired them at the time moving forward, which is why we wanted to work with Get Set to continue to have a legacy of what it gave to us, because it really did change the face of sport in our area.
Today I've been getting involved with some of the Get Set activities that the kids have been doing. It's hugely important for initiatives like Get Set, because I was trying to think back to when I was at primary school, if I had anything that came into my schools. It was never as coordinated, it was never as orchestrated as this, and it wasn't as fun. To be able to play the games that they were doing and to learn all the rules, like I said, of being competitive and competition, I think is amazing, and hopefully it brightens up their day but also gets them active and lets them run around.
Get Set have come down with an athlete which has really inspired our young children today. We're letting them take part in some of the fun activities that Get Set have just launched. They've launched, I believe, 4 or 5 new games. The children seem to love it. It helps them with their basic skills, which is something we really strive for at Curry. Every child at this school has had the opportunity to go to every venue over the Olympic Park and actually see an event, whether it be hockey or the swimming galas that they have over there. To have that on your doorstep, you know, you can't put a price on that for our children.
Hopefully a real example of legacy of the London 2012 Games. Thank you.
Thank you to all our speakers, and unfortunately, it's always the last speaker that feels the brunt of the time pressure, so apologies. Unfortunately, we don't have time for a Q&A session. We are reaching our lunch hour, so if there are questions, again, please feel free to approach our speakers. They're more than happy to answer anything that you'd like to know more about. You'll also be happy to know there are some questions online from people who are watching. So that's also interesting. We can also share what those questions were for your interest. Right now, we're going to head straight into the next and final moment for all of us here. So we're just going to change the setting here. Please bear with us just 1 or 2 minutes.
I suggest you stretch.
Please do some stretching, yes. introduction, but yes, I will formally introduce them again. We have Marie Salois, our director at the IOC of Corporate Sustainability and Development, and we also have the president of KSPO, the Korea Sport Promotion Organization. So without further ado, we will start here, if everyone can. All right, I will turn it over to Marie.
Thank you, Nancy. Every edition I attended since I joined the IOC in 2004 is still in my heart, and I still have vivid emotions. But thank you, London 2012, to pass the torch to me, because I have one that stick in my mind, particularly related to London 2012. I was very lucky in the lead up to London 2012 to run with a torch in the eastern part of London, in a very diverse borough. And I was doing that with, for those who know the music, Dizzy Rascal. So that was quite of an experience, I must admit. And by the time, I was surrounded by people, and I actually disappeared completely, to the point that a policeman asked my daughter, who was 6 at the time, is it fine? Because she was completely scared. Coming from Switzerland, she had never seen a crowd. So everybody was finally fine and really enjoyed, running with the torch in London. And it's still very vivid in my memory, especially because after that, Dizzy Rascal, played in the opening ceremony. So then I realized who he was, because I didn't really know at the time. So as we get to the end of this forum, I would like first of all to thank President Cho for his leadership, not only because KSPO is a really impressive success story, and I think you all realize that by coming here, but also for his leadership in helping us put this forum together, because without you, nothing will ever happen. So thank you for really helping us going to this stepping change today. I also need to acknowledge the journey we have been on, because as I was saying yesterday to you, when we started the journey with Tanya, we really started with a blank sheet of paper. We didn't have a brief, okay? We just knew that we had to be in charge of legacy. So we started, collecting, obviously Tanya has her own experience, being the head of legacy and sustainability for Rio. We knew a few people, but there was nothing organized. So we had really to dig, to get the facts like Tanya presented to you yesterday, but also to get in contact with you and then know you individually. But today is really for me a key milestone, because for the first time, we have you, at least some of you in the room. And for me, it was really great, to learn again about your experiences, because I knew a little bit, but I must admit, every time I meet you, I learn more. So it's every time more impressive. So thank you very much to all those in the room for coming to this forum. So thank you very much. But also I would like to acknowledge we have people who join us remotely. It was mainly broadcasted to them. We couldn't really interact, but I hope, as some of the key learnings for the future, we could also design a forum whereby we can interact with people remotely and make it even more interactive. So that's a key learning for the future, and it's good because it's a first one, so we can always learn along the way. When we come to this end, obviously we get inspired by all of your stories. We heard from you how the games, can be transformational for the host city and territories, how you initiated social change that can last decades, and how you took the opportunity to accelerate change by decades. We heard from many stories, but actually, there were some fundamental belief, as some of you said, that the power of change, of sport can change lives, not only of individuals, but also of communities. So we also experienced the power of the Olympic brand that can bring us together. So today I would like, as we come to the very end and just before proposing to you a declaration, I would like to remind some of the things that the President said yesterday about the importance as part of a strategic roadmap, Olympic Agenda 2020+5, of sustainability and legacy. And of the recommendation 2 that is called Foster Sustainable Olympic Games. And it calls for the delivery of lasting benefits to the host communities prior to and after the Olympic Games. And it highlights some of the things you all mentioned. So the first thing is to ensure that key legacies are achieved before the Olympic Games and that legacy plans and governance structure and long-term funding are in place early in the life cycle. I think we saw many of these examples, and Marie, you were asking, when should you start, setting up the governance? 2 years before the games take place. I think you are in the middle of really setting this up. We spoke about also improving monitoring and measurement of the impact of legacy of the games, including their contribution to the UN Sustainable Development Goals. And in that respect, I would like to highlight an initiative that Tanya is leading with OECD to come up with indicators for the Olympic Games. Some indicators could be common, and some indicators could be, dependent on the vision, the specific edition of each edition of the Games. And I suggest, Tanya, you would follow up with the people here. The third direction for us is to continue interacting with legacy decision makers, including NOC legacy entities after the Olympic Games. So here we are. This forum is aimed at that. We also would like to encourage legacy entities to continue key social, sport, education, and cultural programs after the Olympic Games. So again, a good reason to meet today and in the future. Facilitate the exchange of information among legacy entities of different editions of the Games. Again, this is why we suggest that we continue our discussion. Encourage IF and national federations to use facilities of Olympic host, and we had good discussion at dinner yesterday about that. And last but not least, and here again, your views will be really helpful, to communicate, promote, and celebrate the legacy of all the edition of the Olympic Games, because it's really important that, as you said, we have a stronger voice when we come together. I think every individual story is amazing, but everyone said, we did the best ever, Olympic Games, and we have the best legacy. But actually, together, we have the best impact we can have. And I think this is really what we need to convey to the world together. So in this spirit, and as a result of us coming together here at the Seoul Legacy Forum, hosted by KSPO, again, thank you very much. And as a step to strengthen our collaboration among ourselves, we propose actually a joint declaration which highlights how we can maximize Olympic legacy if we need, if we work stronger together, we will go faster, we'll aim higher, we'll become stronger, and we can make the world a better place. So let me maybe read the first part of it, and President Shaw will take over after me. So, Olympic Legacy Entities Joint Declaration. The Olympic Games are more than 2 weeks of sport competition. As their reach and visibility continue to grow, so do the opportunities for the organizers to deliver lasting benefits to host cities and regions and their populations. These benefits, known as Olympic legacy, begin to take shape even before the Olympic Games begin. At their very heart are benefits related to sport, such as increased opportunities for physical activity and sport practice, or upgraded training center and sport facilities. Olympic legacy goes beyond sport, however. The Games create unique platform for the development of educational projects, professional skills training, new career opportunities, new cultural heritage assets, growth of the volunteering movement, increased global visibility for the host, and accelerated urban development, among others. After the Games, many of these benefits continue, becoming an integral part of the activities of local organizations. Local authorities and national Olympic committees may create, and we strongly encourage them, legal Olympic legacy entities, including through the use of the surplus of the Games. And I believe this is something that you mentioned many times, but people do not know out there. And I think this is something also we need to strengthen, that many of your entities have been created with the surplus of the Games. So these entities, the Olympic legacy entities, to further develop the opportunities created by the Games and to contribute to the development of the local communities. So setting the scene, I now hand over to President Shaw for the declaration.
Yeah, thank you, Marie. Before continue to read the last part of the declaration, I would like to, my heartfelt thanks should go to IOC Director Marie and Tanya and her legacy team in IOC. Thank you very much, really. As Marie mentioned, the Olympic legacy is not just simply relics, no monument in the past, but sustainable long-term benefit provider in the future, as well as an impactful partner in the present time. Therefore, in order to the Olympic legacy to well perform its duties and responsibilities as a part of the Olympic movement, I think it's very significant that we need to put on emphasis on the following few points. First of all, we must further develop intangible Olympic legacy above and beyond the tangible Olympic legacy from now on. Second, we must maintain a strong and sustainable solidarity between and among the global Olympic legacy management entities led by the IOC and here today. Thirdly, people certainly, people to make points. Third, I think this legacy forum today, first time, is a very good example and initiative of IOC's new motto, which yesterday IOC President Thomas Bach mentioned yesterday. Together, yeah, it's very important and good example, I think. Thirdly, and more importantly, cooperation. Mentioned this joint declaration is also very important because Olympic movement and legacy movement not isolated, but they need to cooperate, and we need to learn each other, as you already presented here today. May I therefore take this opportunity to express my profound gratitude once again to the IOC and all the participating Olympic legacy management entities for your aspiration as clearly reflected in the joint declaration. I will continue to read the last part. Today, Olympic legacy entities come together to reiterate their role and commit to continuing and further developing key sports, social, educational, and cultural programs that were initiated or accelerated by the hosting of Olympic Games. Supporting local policies that advocates the awareness, promotion, and practice of physical activity and good health in alignment with the UN Sustainable Development Goals and the WHO's Global Action Plan on Physical Activity. Concerning continuing to promote gender equality, inclusion, and diversity through sport in their local context, keeping the memory of the Olympic Games alive by engaging diverse social groups in Olympic legacy, promoting and celebrating the memory and the legacy of Olympic Games, sharing of best practice among the community of Olympic legacy stakeholders, collaborating with the other Olympic legacy stakeholders, namely the World Union of Olympic Cities, National Olympic Committees, and the international sports federations. Stronger together, agreed at the Seoul Olympic Legacy Forum, organized with the support of International Olympic Committee, 19 October 2022, Seoul, Republic of Korea.
We're just going to take a photo here. Let's just... I believe we have agreement. Okay. We'd also like to take a group photo with all of the attending legacy entities, Olympic game hosts, NOCs, and also future games organizers. So please come to the stage and we'll take a group photo.